I saw Rational Roundtable's latest video in his debate with a user named Skarakova entitled Why Assume God? And there's just too many things that I believe to be wrong with Rational Roundtable's argument of why, quote, the only logical assumption is that a living conscious entity arbitrarily caused the universe to expand, unquote, for me to keep my mouth shut. Quote, as far as I can tell, nature does not do arbitrary things, but living beings can. Unquote. I'd like to make an objection on this point and assert that living beings cannot do arbitrary things. Your assertion that living beings can do arbitrary things is, if I'm not mistaken, tantamount to arguing that free will exists. But even if it's not, if you're willing to take up the challenge, I'd like you, or anyone else for that matter, to provide an example of free will, or an arbitrary action performed by a living thing, i.e., an action taken by a living thing free of prior conditions. That would be an arbitrary action. The fact that I have yet to see or hear of someone provide an example of the aforementioned action, coupled with the subsequent research in neurobiology that shows that what we call the mind is completely dependent on states of the brain, given that damage or disruption to regions of the brain completely obliterate a person's mental capabilities, such as reasoning, making moral judgments, feeling love, and remembering what happened 10 seconds ago. With the additional facts that the activation of motor regions in the brain can be detected 350 milliseconds before a person feels that he or she has decided to move, and the fact that conscious decisions can be predicted up to 10 seconds before they enter awareness with the use of fMRI data, it would appear that free will, or in this case, the arbitrary nature of living things is in fact not arbitrary or free. It is caused, like everything else in nature, by pre-existing conditions that arise outside of our control or awareness. If this holds, you can chuck that bottle out the window, but it will be for a reason having to do with pre-existing conditions, even if you're unaware of what those pre-existing conditions are. Now I'd like to address the non-arbitrary nature of, well, nature. The physical universe in which we exist is, or would appear to be, to the best that we can find, as you stated, non-arbitrary or random, as it were. Hence the reason the physical sciences function as predictive models. Now, there is a part of the natural world that, again, as to best we can find, is arbitrary and or random, and that is quantum physics. In fact, as far as I've been able to understand in my readings as a layperson, the only thing that is consistent about quantum physics is the fact that it's random. This arbitrary nature, however, does not seem to have an effect on the physical world of rocks and stones in which we live. It may underpin an underlying principle behind that physical world, but it does not actually affect the physical happenings in the world. Also, quote, even most scientists that try to argue something that sounds like creation ex nihilo still require something outside of the universe in order to create it. For example, quantum fluctuations or gravity. This statement is false. The scientists that try to argue something that sounds like creation ex nihilo, which now include the preeminent mind on the subject matter in question, Stephen Hawking, do not require something outside of the universe in order to create it. Quantum fluctuations are not outside of the universe. They are part of the fabric of the universe, which is not to be confused with the fabric of space-time. Therefore, the newest theories do not require something outside of the universe for the universe to create itself. and Stephen Hawking's latest book, The Grand Design, is a really good read. Of course, I'm not an expert, and as always in science, these theories are subject to revision with the addition of new data. But then that brings us really to your closing statements. Quote, if we have to conclude that it, the cause of the universe, was either an unliving force or a conscious entity making a choice without the benefit of time, which appears more likely. And I would suggest that the only logical assumption is that a living conscious entity arbitrarily caused the universe to expand, and without having to change the laws of physics or come up with entirely new ideas or simply state it's an unknown, we have no satisfactory alternate answer, unquote. Basically what I got from that closing statement is that in lieu of saying I don't know or attempting to come up with novel ideas about the origins of the universe, we should accept the assumption that an invisible, undetectable, conscious entity devoid of a mind created the universe from nothing through the use of nothing but its own will while being outside of the universe. That to me sounds like an assumption based entirely on conjecture, devoid of any reason or logic contingent upon what we know or possibly even capable of knowing about the universe in which we live. On top of that, even if it did make total and complete sense, it's still a long, long way from showing the existence of the God of Abraham, the God that Rational Roundtable believes in, is a logical assumption to make. But I could be wrong on that. Let me know what you think.
I have captured the enemy for meat testing. Praise me! Praise me!